Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Um, I would like to begin by stating that I will be accepting the committee's amendments and thank the committee for working with me on this measure. AB 1078 is a bill that intends to combat the national Christian white supremacist movement, which aims to ban books, school curriculum, and even more in our schools. And this issue makes people uncomfortable. It's a tough discussion, and it's a tough issue. And a lot of it, I think, is due to the misunderstanding of what people mean when they say white Christian nationalist. And so I want to make sure that people understand really the definition to hopefully put more people at ease that if the shoe doesn't fit, then no one's talking about you. We're really talking about the radicalization of the Christian faith to, quite frankly, draw upon people's angers, economic angst, people's search for additional resources, and drawing upon people's biases to really achieve and use that anger to achieve a political objective. And unfortunately, that number one is happening internationally. This is not something unique to the United States, but it's also made its way here to California. And the banning of books has been a blatant and in some cases a successful effort to whitewash the history that students are taught in all levels of public education. Even more concerning is the fact that this movement is also taking place here in this Golden State and even in my county of Riverside County. And we cannot allow the education of California's future leaders to have holes and even falsehoods in our history and the lessons that we teach, especially when those gaps include the history of African Americans and other communities of color, the history of racism in America, and the very existence of the LGBTQ plus community. According to the American Library Association, they found that more than 1,200 challenges of more than 2,500 books nationwide, nearly double the record set the year before in 2021, since we've been even tracking this data for the last 20 years. Those who cannot remember or even be able to learn the past are condemned to repeat it. And we cannot allow our students to finish their education without having learned all of the country's history and understanding the commonalities that we all share as one people. AB 1078 would require the California Department of Education to issue guidance to help local education agencies and school personnel manage conversations surrounding race, socioeconomic status, gender identity or expression, and LGBTQ plus orientations, and how they can review instructional materials to reflect diverse perspectives that are culturally relevant. This bill would also expand existing law to require that whenever governing boards adopt instructional materials, to make sure that they are including an accurate portrayal of the history, and that also the material reflects the cultural and racial diversity of our society. We know that when young people see themselves in the material, they are more successful. And so we stand today at a crossroads where inaction is simply just not acceptable. And we cannot allow this movement to expand on our watch. And so this is a attempt to ignite this conversation, bring the best and brightest together to find how to really make this work. This is very, 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 very complicated. Let's make that clear. And our first attempt in doing this may not solve everything, but we must do something because we know that silence is simply not acceptable. And so we must meet this moment in history and ensure that we are on the right side of it. And I would like to also do a shout out to my intern, Serafina Johnson, for preparing these remarks. And with that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
All right. Witnesses in support of the measure, please come forward.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Lillis, Executive Director for Teach Plus California, and strong support of AB 1078 as amended. The mission of Teach Plus is we work with empowered, diverse educators who want to improve the system for the students that they serve. And our teacher leaders believe that all students in California should be taught using high-quality curriculum and materials. In addition to integrating grade-level content and close alignment to college and career-ready standards, high-quality instructional materials represent students' identities and histories, reify the purpose of academic concepts and skills in students' everyday lives, and guide teachers to make home-school connections that are free from bias. Materials that do not address these factors are incomplete and do not fully meet the needs of culturally, ethnically, racially, and linguistically diverse students. Therefore, they should not be considered high quality. We believe that AB 1078 takes us on the road. We have a long conversation ahead of us, but it's a really important step. So thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter in support.
Thank you. Any further public comments in support of the bill? Any witnesses in opposition to the bill? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Carlos Machado with California School Board Association. Not necessarily in opposition. We did take an opposed position on the introduced version of the bill. We appreciate the committee's work on these amendments and also the author's willingness to hear the concerns that we had with that version. We will take a look at the amendments as they're amended into the bill and take a look at our position then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lance Christensen, the Vice President of the California Policy Center. I've been around this building for a long time. It's shocking to have an author of a bill make such inflammatory commentary on those that would oppose this bill in good faith. I hope that the committee and the chair will take them to advisement. And how many attacks on those who oppose radical indoctrination doesn't mean we're all white Christian nationalists. Really, this is just a very commonsensical thing, Chair. What's more stunning is that there's a confusion here. There's a confusion about the curation of books versus banning books. Schools aren't banning books. They're just simply not the Library of Congress. They don't have every single text available to every single school and every single student. This is very commonsensical. So for a parent who is opposed to radical, pornographic, or other material shouldn't be called a white Christian nationalist because his intern said so. So I hope, Chair, that there will be some correction here about the professional demeanor of having an intelligent conversation. We have our comments written in opposition.
Let's focus on the merits of the
And I wish that the author would focus on the merits too, instead of name calling. So here's where we are. We hope that he'll understand that parents ultimately are in control of the education of their children, not a bureaucrat in Sacramento. We oppose AB 1078.
Thank you. Any public comments in opposition to the bill, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Sheehy here on behalf of the Protection of the Educational Rights of Kids Advocacy. We're in opposition to the bill as it's written. We appreciate very much the amendments that the committee has suggested. We think it moves the bill in a much better direction than it was when it was introduced. But until the bill is actually amended, we can take a look at it. We remain in opposition. Thank you.
Lisa Disbrow, informed parents of Contra Costa. I'm short. Cultural competency belongs in the hands of the local parents and the local school board, and that's being eroded. It should stop.
A reminder, please keep your public comments to name, affiliation, position on the bill.
Good afternoon, Kasia Williams on behalf of California Parents Union, representing parents, grandparents, teachers across California. We're asking for a no or abstain vote on this bill. If I may just add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments in opposition to the bill? Seeing none. Questions, comments from the committee? Ms. Quirk-Silva.
Yeah. We said this is a tough conversation.
It is tough, but it isn't tough. I mean, I think the truth is that even the speaker who just was very upset about using some language that you used, in essence, also used language that was offensive when you say radical indoctrination. Even that implication assumes that teachers in California are radicalizing students. So there is a lot of assumptions being made, and the idea that our library books, our curriculum, can be picked and chosen by one person's opinion, or in this case, 2 to 3 board members, a majority of board members, and simply books that have been childhood books that families have enjoyed for years, and because of 3 majority school board members, those can be pulled out. But even more than that is that thousands of our kids can be literally the opportunity to learn stripped from them because for some people, they don't want history to be taught. Now, the history of America is mixed with beautiful images, with great stories of Olympians, with building of America. And yet there's also history that is not pretty. And it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if we cannot allow our students and our families to present accurate history, we are in a jeopardy of having some students with one lens of history and others with no lens because they were never given the opportunity. We see across America, we can look at Florida as an example of we are going to pull these books away. We aren't going to use certain language. We're going to sue Disney. And these are the places we're seeing. Even in Montana, we've seen just, I think, today or yesterday, one of the members that was elected to the government now being told that she cannot come to the floor to do her job. This is the radicalization. This is where we must stand up. And the idea of local control, I was a local control elected council person, but also a classroom teacher, and that we would allow 3 school board members out of a body of 5 to strip possibly thousands of students in their district. Again, the opportunity to learn, to me, is very objectionable. I certainly do hope that we can get some common ground between parents, between educators, between the legislative body, local control, but we have to stand up for history and accuracy, and I will support this bill.
Thank you. You know, I have to respectfully disagree with my colleague and respectfully, you know, object. I would say to the rhetoric of, you know, whatever, it's a Christian white nationalist agenda. You know, I try very hard on this, you know, in this committee and in this body to, you know, even when I disagree, I don't want to label people. And my fear with that rhetoric is that we are lumping, you know, or calling parents that are trying to engage in their child's education all into that category. And my fear is that, you know, because I can tell you firsthand, as someone who was at the local level on a school board, parents believe strongly in their child's education, and I would not put all parents that object to some of these materials in that category. I think what I have heard from so many parents across my district and obviously in the state as well is that many of them simply want age-appropriate materials for their kids. And I think that is oftentimes, you know, there's this like rhetoric going on where we're calling that banning books. And I don't think it's objectionable to ask for age-appropriate materials in our classrooms. And in some cases, there have been evidence, and I've seen the evidence at the local level, of that not being the case. And so to call parents who object to that, you know, white nationalists or Christian white nationalists, I think is really problematic. We elect our school boards for a very specific purpose. Our communities, they are accountable to the communities that elect them. And as a believer in local control and a believer that parents should be a part of their child's education, I think these are decisions that are best made at the local level. You know, you did mention in your testimony that this is very complicated. You know, I think this is a very difficult issue to discuss, and I think it's good that we're having the conversation. But I think it's a conversation that has to happen at the local level. And for this, you know, for this body to, you know, tell every local community across the state that they can no longer have this conversation, I think is really problematic. So, you know, for that reason, I'm going to have to oppose the bill today. I would add one additional point, and I think, you know, to the California School Boards Association, I know came and said they're still looking at the amendments, and I do appreciate you taking the amendments. I do think it moves the bill in a better direction. But I hope that California School Boards Association and potentially even AXA comes in and opposes this bill, because we have an enrollment crisis in our state. We have declining enrollment in districts across this state. And the more that we inject this type of rhetoric into our schools, I think we're going to lose more and more students. Our districts are going to lose more and more funding. We are driving students out of our traditional public schools. And I think we need to really understand and respect that there are a myriad of different opinions and different families with different thoughts and religious beliefs and backgrounds in our schools, and we need to have respect for all of those backgrounds. Now, I do not tolerate hate. I do not tolerate some of the rhetoric that you are referring to, and I'm not trying to say that none of that ever happens, because there are comments that are made at school board meetings that I have heard as well that should not be tolerated, and I respect that. But we need to let our locals have those conversations on their own, and I think that this is going to continue to drive a wedge and create problems for enrollment in our districts, and I'm going to have to oppose today. Thank you.
No, I definitely respect that. I would just say this, you know, I mentioned in my comments, and which is why I gave the academic definition of what a white Christian nationalist is. And I said very blatantly, if it doesn't fit you, I'm not talking about you. And so I think at the end of the day, what we have to realize is that when we have the discussions, we have to tell the truth. And the research is overwhelming about what has ignited this movement all over the world. And so I don't do it to try to label someone. I don't do it to try to demean someone. But a part of being an anti-racist is about really just telling it the way it is, and without trying to, while we're talking about it, not demonizing each other, right? We can have this conversation and go back and forth, and you have your reasons, I have mine, and this is a part of what should be happening. But there is a fact that over 150 school districts in this nation actually have banned books. This is not an opinion. They have actually said Martin Luther King book is no longer allowed here in this school. And so this is not an opinion. This is not me. These are actual studies in terms of what has actually happened. And people are using issues of parents' rights and local control to advance political objectives. And those who might actually be there for the right reasons and legitimate concerns are in the middle of it. But in my county, I know for sure that this is happening. I have teachers who have called me and told me that they are afraid to talk about issues of racism, that they're afraid to read certain books, or they feel they might lose their jobs. This is just happening on the ground. And we have to have these conversations, and we have to make sure that we educate people that this is happening. Now, I do understand that every parent has a right to question and address concerns that they may have with their own child's education. I believe that overwhelmingly the majority of them are doing it out of general concern for the welfare of their child. But unfortunately, it's not 100%. And now we are forced to have to put it into safeguards to be able to do that. And so I understand the concern. This is just the beginning of a conversation that we're going to continue to have. We actually have a working group now coming together of School Boards Association, Access, a part of it as well. And we're trying to create a policy that also doesn't have unintended consequences, right? And Charter School Association's a part of it. I mean, a whole array of people. We're trying to bring everyone in the room to say, how can we do this in a balanced way, in a thoughtful way, and a way that makes sure that those who do have ill will don't have a foothold that they can continue to spread.
There's not a lot I can follow with all the amazing things you just said and the incredible thoughtfulness you just provided. But I just wanted to say that, I always appreciate your effort, appreciate the bill, and you always speaking truth to power on this. I would love to join you as a co-author on this bill, if possible, and I will also make the motion to move the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second that motion, and I just want to say that I appreciate that when you started, you said this could be uncomfortable. And let's face it, discussions about these issues and marginalized communities and race is uncomfortable. Doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it. And I think you're respectful. I think that our colleague was respectful, that sometimes there's a little bit of uncomfortableness. And I know that you two are going to talk things out and make sure you understand each other even more so. But let's get back to the matter at hand. So we have a bill here, and it's not too complicated. It just has our State Board of Education develop by July 2024 a policy for LEAs to follow before removing instructional materials. Because we don't want people to go off half-baked because of some political agenda, whatever agenda there is. And I think that that's what we should be focusing on, and I don't think this policy is that controversial in the first place. So thank you for authoring this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I just want to give, I think your last comments, I think your last comments really kind of de-escalated a little bit, and I think that is one of the issues that we're having as a society in communication, which is everybody standing their ground. And there are efforts throughout the United States to kind of start to create areas, not here in committee room, but in your own communities, whether it's a breaking bread dinner, whether it's a common ground, like what do we have in common versus what we don't. And the reason I come back to this is we've seen such an escalation really in the last 5, 6, 7 years of there's no room for discussion. And then immediately we have this ramping up of escalation. And when we can figure out ways to bring that temperature down and try to say, well, maybe I can see what you're saying. I don't agree with you, but I can see what you're saying. But I do want to get back to the curriculum part. I did see one of the lists, and again, I don't know where it is, but one of the books on the list was Where the Wild Things Are. And this is a book that I used to read to my own children. And it's about a little boy who can't even remember the whole book, but it's a very lovely book in illustrations, very few words, and this is one of the books that was listed. And again, you could put 6 people in the room that could have the same book, and one would fall in love with it, and others would be, this is just not for my child. And so there certainly should be some room for, of course, parents to have their opinion. But when we have curriculum in a classroom, that is what curriculum committees do. That's what our instructional curriculum at the state does, is they analyze different ways to teach children, whether it's math, whether it's history, whether it's language arts. And they have experts from, I'm assuming, all political parties there to really analyze what is the best way children learn. What do they respond to? How do they accept materials? And I think us saying, let's get a body to really come forward by 2024 with some recommendations, I think is an important step, particularly because we are so heated in the moment. And again, as I said, I would encourage you to continue. I liked the idea of the working group that you mentioned. It seems to have many voices there. And I think that if we can do this in a graceful way, this is going to have a potential to really change the way we are as human beings interacting, because it's been so volatile out there and so difficult. And I'm just wondering how our young people are absorbing all this, because they're taking in all this. They take in how adults respond. They hear what their parents are saying. They see what's happening, and they take in all of that. And I really think it's incumbent about us to not only take a bill and process it, but how do we respond? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Seeing no further questions or comments, motion's been made and seconded. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for raising such a compelling and timely issue. As you stated, I mean, it's a hot button issue, not only here in California, but across the country. And so you are taking this head on. I think I shared with you in my own daughter's school district, there was a effort by a parents group to ban a book that dealt with gender identity issues. Kind of along the lines of what Mr. Hoover was saying, I given that this was my daughter's school district, I got a copy of the book and I read through it, and I was looking for, things that I might feel as a parent that were age inappropriate. But what I found, it was a book that was read to a 5th grade class on gender identity, and I felt that it was a wonderful book. It was a book that was talking about inclusion. It was talking about accepting people for who they are, and so I think for the Department of Education to provide the guidance to the local school districts, before they start banning these books, is incredibly timely and incredibly important. I look forward to your ongoing work with this working group, but I'm very happy to support this bill. Would you like to close?
Thank you all very much. And I think this discussion just proves that we can actually respectfully have tough discussions and in some cases just disagree in terms of how the problem should be solved, right? And but one thing is clear, there's a problem. And to see the type of tension and downright nastiness that's happening right now in local school districts is something that none of us want to see as a member of our society. And so we have got to do this in a thoughtful way and in a way that makes sure that everyone feels heard, everyone feels respected, but at the same time making sure that we don't fall back and lose all the progress we've made in terms of equity, inclusion, and ensuring that all people are looked upon with their full dignity and humanity wherever they find themselves here in California. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
File item 18, AB 1078. The motion is due pass as amended to appropriations. Marisucci?
Aye.
Marisucci, aye. Dally? Juan Carrillo? Aye. Juan Carrillo, aye. Hoover? No. Hoover, no. Lee? Aye. Lee, aye. McCarty? Aye. McCarty, aye. Quirk Silva?
Aye.
Quirk Silva, aye.
We have 5 votes. 5 votes. The bill is out.
Thank you.